I used to tell myself I didn't need anyone. Not in the brave way people say it in movies, like a clean mantra that makes you stand taller. In my version, it was a shield. Heavy, dented, reliable. I'd slip it on every morning with my uniform, my badge, my practiced face. I was 30 years old, a patrol officer in a Phoenix suburb, and a single mom to an 8-year-old girl who could read my lies the way she read street signs. I told myself I was protecting her. The truth was uglier. I was afraid that if I ever admitted I needed help, the world would decide I didn't deserve her. If you're here for a story that starts polished and calm, I can't give you that. Mine starts on a night that smelled like asphalt after rain, with the blue and red strobe of my cruiser flickering across my windshield, and my hands shaking so hard I had to sit on them to stop. I just finished a welfare check that turned into a domestic call, then a chase that ended in an empty lot, then paperwork that didn't care that my brain was begging for silence. I drove home thinking only of Maya, my daughter, hoping she'd be asleep, hoping I could stare at her face for a second and remember what peace felt like. But when I turned into our apartment complex, I saw a clipboard and 2 strangers in business casual clothes standing near the lobby. One of them looked up at me like she'd been waiting. Before I go any further, do me a favor. Hit subscribe if you want the rest of the story, and tell me what city you're watching from in the comments. I read them. I really do. Maybe you'll recognize parts of yourself in mine, and maybe that'll make both of us feel less alone. They introduced themselves calmly, the way people do when they're about to detonate your life with polite words. Child Protective Services. A report had been made. An anonymous complaint, alleging that my daughter was being left alone for extended periods. Neglect. The word landed inside my chest like a brick dropped down a stairwell. I stood there in my uniform, gun on my hip, sweat drying at the base of my neck, trying not to show the panic because panic is something predators smell. That's not true, I said, too fast. She's fine. She's safe. Their eyes moved past my shoulder toward the hallway that led to our unit, as if the building itself could testify against me. I wanted to blame my ex. I wanted to blame the neighbors. I wanted to blame the entire world for demanding I be 2 people at once, the officer and the mother, the calm one and the exhausted one. And then, like my brain was a dog that only knew one trick, it latched onto the easiest target. Rowan, the woman across the hall. The one I'd decided, without ever really knowing her, was fake, heartless, too smooth in a way that felt like performance. She always looked put together, even when she was just taking out the trash. She worked from home, always in some soft sweater or clean t-shirt, hair loosely pinned back, a faint scent like citrus drifting from her doorway. She smiled at everyone. She made small talk. She said good morning, like it mattered. And I hated her for it, because I didn't trust softness. Softness had never kept anyone safe. Rowan and I had history, if you could call it that. A few months earlier, I'd come home after a double shift to find Maya in the hallway, sitting cross-legged on the carpet with her backpack open, showing her spelling words to someone I didn't recognize at first. Rowan was kneeling across from her, pointing gently at a worksheet, her voice low and patient. When Rowan looked up at me, she didn't jump or apologize. She just said, "Hey, Officer Hart," like she'd been expecting me. "Maya said you got called in again. I told her we could practice until you got home." My throat had tightened with something I couldn't name. I'd snapped, "She shouldn't be talking to strangers," even though I knew Rowan wasn't a stranger. We'd signed the same lease. We shared the same elevator. I'd just never allowed her to become real. Her name, Rowan Blake, appeared on my mental list of suspects the second the CPS worker said the words, "Anonymous report." It fit my narrative. She was always watching, always smiling, always around. I could hear my own thoughts turning into a courtroom. She was the type to judge me, the type to call someone about a child she didn't understand, the type to ruin a mother's life and sleep fine afterward. When the CPS workers asked if they could schedule an in-home visit, I heard myself agree, numb and furious. And all I could think was, I'm going to find out who did this. I'm going to end it before it ends me. Maya was awake when I opened our door. She was in her pajamas, pink shorts, an oversized t-shirt with a cartoon astronaut, standing in the kitchen doorway with a bowl of cereal clutched to her chest like armor. Her eyes found mine and widened, immediately scanning my face for danger. "Mom," she whispered, "why are there people outside?" I crossed the room in 3 long strides and knelt in front of her, trying to soften my voice, trying to make my hands steady. "Hey, baby," I said. "It's okay. They're just asking questions." The lie tasted bitter, but I needed it. She needed it. The next morning, I saw Rowan in the hallway. She was locking her door, a canvas tote on her shoulder, her hair still damp like she'd showered recently. For a second, the sunlight from the stairwell hit her face and made her look younger than I'd assumed. 30, maybe, like me, but with that calm, unhurried energy that made me feel like a storm. She turned when she sensed me, her smile forming automatically. "Morning, Lena," she said. My first name, like we were neighbors in the normal sense, like we had coffee dates and not cold wars. Something in me snapped into place. I walked toward her before I could talk myself out of it, my jaw tight, my heartbeat loud. "Did you do it?" I asked. "Did you call CPS on me?" Rowan froze. The smile vanished so fast it was like watching a light switch flip. Her eyes searched my face with real confusion, then something sharper, hurt maybe, or disbelief. "What?" she said softly, like she hadn't heard me right. I stepped closer, close enough to smell the citrus again, close enough to see the tiny freckles across the bridge of her nose. "Don't play innocent," I said. "Someone reported me. They said Maya's been left alone. And I know you've been watching. I know you—" My words stumbled over each other, fueled by fear pretending to be certainty. Rowan's throat bobbed as she swallowed, and her voice came out steady but strained. "Lena," she said, "I would never do that to you." She paused, like she was deciding whether to say the next part. Then she met my eyes and said the sentence that rearranged my entire world. "I look after your daughter." When Rowan said, "I look after your daughter," something inside me recoiled before it softened. My first instinct wasn't gratitude. It was suspicion. The hallway felt too narrow, the air too thin. I crossed my arms like I was bracing for impact. "That's not your job," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Rowan didn't step back. She didn't get defensive. She just shifted her weight slightly, the tote bag sliding down her shoulder, and held my gaze. "I know it's not," she replied, "but I've been home, and she's 8. She shouldn't feel alone." I hated that the word alone hit me in the chest like a confession. I opened my mouth to argue, but no clean sentence came out. Instead, what came was defensive and brittle. "You don't get to decide what's best for my kid." My heart was pounding too hard for the conversation to feel rational. Rowan nodded slowly. "You're right," she said. "I don't. I just make sure she's okay. That's it." The softness in her voice didn't feel fake. It felt careful. And careful was not something I associated with fake people. I stepped back first. Pride or fear? I couldn't tell which one. "If you had concerns, you should have come to me," I said, not answering her denial, not fully believing it either. "I did," she answered quietly. "Twice." I blinked. "When?" "Last month. I asked if you wanted me to text you if she knocked on my door. You said you didn't need help." Her words weren't accusatory, they were factual. That somehow made them worse. I remembered it. The way I'd brushed her off, too tired to decode kindness, too defensive to accept it. The hallway fell into a silence that didn't know where to land. I studied her face for cracks, some flicker of guilt or manipulation, but all I found was something steadier. "I didn't call anyone," she said again, softer now. "I would have talked to you first." My brain wanted proof. My heart wanted to believe her. Neither one knew how to win. "If I find out you're lying," I started. Rowan's mouth twitched, almost a sad smile. "You won't," she said. "That afternoon, I left Maya with instructions so detailed they bordered on absurd. Text me if you need anything. Don't open the door. Don't go anywhere. Call me if someone knocks." She nodded, serious and small, and I hated the way responsibility sat on her shoulders like a backpack too heavy for her frame. As I drove away, I glanced up at our building's 3rd floor. Rowan's curtains were open. Her silhouette moved past the window briefly, watching, or maybe just living her life. I couldn't tell anymore. My shift dragged. Every call felt louder, every siren sharper. My mind kept replaying her voice. "I look after your daughter." It wasn't possessive. It wasn't territorial. It sounded protective. By the time I got home, dusk had painted the sky in muted oranges and purple shadows. I stepped into the hallway and stopped short. Our door was cracked open. Panic hit first. White. Blinding. I drew my weapon before logic could catch up, pushing the door open with my shoulder. "Maya," I called out, adrenaline already burning through my veins. From the living room came a burst of laughter. Maya's, bright and uninhibited. I rounded the corner to find her on the couch, legs tucked under her, a sketch pad balanced on her knees. Rowan sat cross-legged on the floor in front of her, another pad in her lap, a pencil tucked behind her ear. They both looked up at me at the same time. Maya's face lit up. Rowan's went still. "Mom, look!" Maya held up a drawing of a police car. exaggerated and colorful, with tiny glitter stars around it. Rowan showed me how to make it look shiny. My eyes flicked to Rowan. She looked normal. Not sneaky. Not guilty. Just present. She knocked because the power flickered, Rowan said carefully. I texted you. I didn't want her alone if something went wrong. My phone buzzed in my pocket as if on cue. I hadn't checked it. I holstered my weapon slowly, the shame creeping in like heat under my skin. I told you not to go anywhere, I said to Maya, but the edge had dulled. She frowned. I didn't go anywhere. I just went across. Like that difference was obvious, like it had always been obvious. Rowan stood up, brushing invisible dust from her jeans. She was close now, closer than before, and I became hyper-aware of how tall she was, how her eyes were a deep, calm green that didn't flinch away from mine. You can be mad at me, she said gently, but don't be mad at her. The audacity of that should have annoyed me. Instead, it disarmed me. I'm not mad, I muttered, though my tone betrayed how tangled I felt. Rowan tilted her head slightly. You don't have to carry everything alone, she said. I know you think you do. My throat tightened unexpectedly. No one said things like that to me. Not colleagues, not my ex, not even my own reflection. I forced a small defensive laugh. You don't know me, I said. Rowan's gaze softened. Maybe not, she replied. But I know her. Maya looked between us like we were a tennis match. Can Rowan stay for dinner? She asked, hopeful and oblivious. The question hung there, fragile and dangerous. Rowan opened her mouth to decline, but I surprised myself. If she wants, I said. It wasn't surrender. It was curiosity. Rowan hesitated only a second before nodding. I'd like that, she said. Dinner was simple, pasta and jarred sauce, but the room felt different, lighter. Maya talked nonstop, explaining a story she was writing about an astronaut detective. Rowan listened like every word mattered. When Maya got up to grab a napkin, Rowan and I found ourselves alone at the table for a breath too long. Our eyes met. Something unspoken passed between us. An awareness, maybe, or a shift in gravity. I looked away first. Later, when Rowan stood at our door to leave, the hallway light casting soft shadows along her cheekbones, she paused. For what it's worth, she said quietly. I think you're a good mom. I swallowed. Compliments felt like accusations in disguise. You don't know that, I answered automatically. Rowan gave me a look that was almost exasperated. I see the way she looks at you, she said. That's how I know. For a second, the world narrowed to the space between us, barely a foot of air that suddenly felt charged. When she finally turned and walked back to her apartment, I closed the door slowly, my hand lingering on the knob. I had built an entire narrative about who she was. Fake, heartless, interfering, and yet tonight, all I saw was a woman sitting on my living room floor, teaching my daughter how to draw stars. I wasn't ready to admit I'd been wrong, but something had shifted. The shield I wore so comfortably had cracked, just a hairline fracture, and through it, something warmer was starting to seep in. I didn't sleep much that night, not because of the CPS visit. That dread was a steady hum now, like background static, but because of the way Rowan's voice had sounded in my kitchen, calm. Certain, not defensive. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment she said she thought I was a good mom. I'd been called many things in my life. Strong, stubborn, intimidating, difficult, but rarely good. Especially not in the one role that mattered most. The next morning, Maya woke up earlier than usual. I found her at the kitchen table with her cereal, swinging her legs under the chair. Is Rowan coming over again? She asked casually, like she was asking about the weather. I paused mid-step. Why? I asked. Maya shrugged. Because she said she could show me how to draw hands better. Mine looked like potatoes. I couldn't help it. I laughed. The sound surprised both of us. At work, I kept checking my phone more than I should have. No updates from CPS, no new calls from unknown numbers. Just a text from Rowan around noon. Power's stable today. Maya's doing homework at the table. She's fine. I stared at it longer than necessary. She didn't have to send that. She wasn't obligated, and yet she did. I typed back before I could overthink it. Thanks. A minute later. You can text me if she comes over. I won't bite. Her reply came almost instantly. Noted. That evening, I got home later than planned. Traffic was backed up from a minor accident on the freeway, and my nerves were already frayed. When I stepped into the hallway, I saw the familiar crack of Rowan's door open, warm light spilling into the corridor. I hesitated only a second before knocking. she answered with a paintbrush in her hand and a faint smudge of blue on her cheek. I blinked. Are you redecorating? I asked, half teasing, half guarded. Rowan glanced down at herself and smiled sheepishly. Maya insisted we add stars to the cardboard spaceship, she said. I may have gotten carried away. I stepped inside before I could talk myself out of it. Maya was in the middle of the living room floor, surrounded by construction paper and markers, a half-built rocket taped together with determined optimism. She beamed when she saw me. Mom, look, Rowan says perspective is important. I looked at Rowan. Perspective, huh? Rowan shrugged lightly. It helps, she said. The apartment was cozy. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with sketchbooks and what looked like children's novels. A half-finished illustration rested on a drafting table near the window. Bright, whimsical characters I recognized from Maya's backpack. You did that? I asked quietly. Rowan nodded. I illustrate for kids' publishers. Mostly small projects. Nothing fancy. Nothing fancy. The understatement made me smile before I could stop myself. Maya tugged at my sleeve. Can Rowan stay for dinner? She asked again, hope written across her face. I looked at Rowan, waiting for her to decline this time. Instead, she met my gaze steadily. Only if you want me to, she said. No pressure, no expectation, just choice. I inhaled slowly. Letting her stay felt like stepping onto thin ice, uncertain, risky. But something in me was tired of standing alone on solid ground. Stay, I said. Dinner was louder than usual. Maya insisted on telling Rowan about my brave police stories, exaggerating details until I sounded like a superhero. Rowan listened with wide eyes and mock awe, occasionally asking questions that made Maya glow with pride. I found myself watching them more than eating, noticing how naturally Rowan adjusted to Maya's energy. She didn't talk over her. She didn't patronize. She just engaged. After dishes were done and Maya disappeared into her room to brush her teeth, Rowan lingered by the sink, drying her hands slowly. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, quieter. The distance between us had shrunk without permission. You don't have to do this, I said softly, breaking the silence. Rowan tilted her head. Do what? Step in, I clarified. Help. She leaned back against the counter, crossing her arms loosely. I'm not stepping in, she replied. I'm standing beside. The words landed differently. Beside implied partnership, equality. It implied I wasn't failing just because I wasn't omnipresent. I looked at her fully then, really looked. She was beautiful in a way that didn't demand attention. Soft brown hair pulled into a low bun, faint freckles, hands still faintly stained with paint. Her eyes held mine without challenge, without submission. Just presence. I don't trust easily, I admitted, surprising myself. Rowan's expression softened, I figured. She stepped a little closer, but not enough to invade. You don't have to trust me all at once, she said. Just let me earn it. The air between us shifted again, subtle but undeniable. I became aware of how close we were, of the faint citrus scent I'd come to associate with her. My pulse quickened, for reasons that had nothing to do with patrol duty. Maya's voice echoed down the hallway. Mom, can Rowan read the story tonight? I hesitated, heart pounding in my throat. Rowan glanced toward the hallway, then back at me. Only if it's okay, she murmured. I nodded. Watching Rowan sit on Maya's bed, book open in her lap, her voice gentle and animated as she read, did something unexpected to me. It loosened something tight inside my chest. Maya leaned into her without hesitation, safe and content. When the story ended and Maya drifted off, Rowan stepped quietly into the hallway. I closed Maya's door softly behind us. For a second, we stood there, facing each other in the dim light. Thank you, I said, and this time it wasn't defensive. Rowan searched my face carefully. You're allowed to let someone help you, she replied. The words hung between us, fragile and charged, and before I could stop myself, before I could overthink it or retreat behind pride, I reached out and brushed a faint streak of paint from her cheek with my thumb. Her breath hitched. Mine did too. We froze in that suspended second, close enough to feel warmth, not close enough to cross the line, not yet. I told myself that touching her face meant nothing. It was practical, reflexive, a harmless gesture to wipe away blue paint. That's what I repeated in my head later that night while I stood under the shower, water pounding against my shoulders like interrogation lights. But the truth was that my pulse hadn't reacted like it was harmless. My pulse had reacted like something had just shifted tectonically beneath my feet. The next morning, Rowan didn't text. I noticed immediately, which annoyed me. I told myself I didn't expect anything. that she wasn't obligated to update me. But as I stood at a red light on my way back from dropping Maya at school, I caught myself checking my phone again. Nothing. I felt the absence of her words like an empty space at the table. It wasn't until mid-afternoon that my phone buzzed. She forgot her lunch. I made her a sandwich and dropped it off. Hope that's okay. I stared at the message longer than necessary. There was no performance in it. No, look what I did. Just information. Care. Delivered quietly. Thank you, I typed back. A few seconds passed. You're welcome, Lena. She used my first name like it belonged to her mouth. That evening, when I got home, Maya was waiting by the door. Rowan says perspective is also important in life, she announced seriously. I arched a brow. Oh? And what does that mean? Maya shrugged. It means maybe you shouldn't be mad at people before you know the whole story. I went very still. Did Rowan tell you to say that? I asked carefully. Maya frowned. No. She just said sometimes grown-ups think they know everything. I let out a slow breath. Kids were terrifyingly observant. Later that night, I knocked on Rowan's door without rehearsing what I'd say. She opened it wearing loose gray sweatpants and a soft black t-shirt. Hair down now, falling in natural waves around her shoulders. No makeup, no armor, just her. Yes? She asked gently. I'm not mad, I said, too abruptly. Her lips twitched. I didn't think you were, she replied. I exhaled through my nose. I was, I admitted. I'm used to being the only one responsible. Rowan leaned lightly against the doorframe. You still are, she said. I'm not replacing you. Something in me loosened at that. I know, I murmured. We stood there in the quiet hum of the hallway lights, neither of us stepping back. Can I ask you something? She said. Depends, I replied automatically. She smiled faintly. Why did you think I was fake? The question landed softer than I expected. No accusation, just curiosity. I looked at her, really looked. You're always calm, I said finally, put together, patient. People who look that controlled usually have something to hide. And you? She asked. I don't hide, I answered. Her eyes flicked to my jaw, the tension in my shoulders. Lena, she said gently, you live in armor. I bristled. I'm a cop. You're a human, she corrected quietly. The hallway suddenly felt too small for the truth she'd just handed me. I don't know how not to, I admitted, before I could stop myself. Rowan stepped forward just slightly, enough to shrink the air between us again. You don't have to take it off all at once, she said softly. Just loosen a strap. Her voice wasn't flirtatious. It was intimate. My breath grew shallow. I could see the tiny scar near her eyebrow, the faint rise and fall of her chest. The way her hand twitched like she wanted to reach for me but wasn't sure she should. The moment stretched, charged, dangerous. Rowan, I whispered. Yeah? And then I did something reckless. I reached for her. Not aggressively, not urgently, just my fingers brushing against her wrist. Her skin was warm. She didn't pull away. Instead, her free hand came up slowly, hesitantly, until her fingers hovered near my waist. Tell me to stop, she said, voice barely above a breath. I didn't. Her hand settled against my hip. The contact wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was grounding. Real. My pulse thundered, but not from fear. From want. I leaned in first. Just a fraction. Just enough for our foreheads to almost touch. Her breath mingled with mine. My badge wasn't on my belt. My armor wasn't between us. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to brace for impact. Our lips brushed. Soft. Testing. Not a full kiss. Not yet. Just a question. She answered by deepening it slightly. Still gentle, still careful. My hand slid from her wrist to her waist. Her fingers tightened subtly against me. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't rushed. It felt like something that had been building quietly, finally given permission to exist. When we finally pulled back, the air between us felt different. Not heavy. Just alive. We should probably slow down, she murmured, even though her hand hadn't moved. Probably, I agreed. Neither of us stepped away immediately, but eventually I did, because I still had a CPS investigation hanging over my head, because I still wasn't sure who had reported me, because something fragile had just begun, and fragile things require protection. As I walked back into my apartment, heart still racing, I realized something unsettling. I wasn't just afraid of losing custody of my daughter. I was afraid of losing her, Rowan. And that fear felt infinitely more dangerous. The morning after I kissed Rowan, I woke up feeling like I had broken into my own life. For years, everything had been compartmentalized: work, motherhood, survival. I didn't blur lines, I reinforced them. But now there was this soft electric memory sitting just beneath my skin, replaying itself every time I blinked. The way her breath had hitched. The way her hand had settled on my hip like it belonged there. Maya noticed before I did. "You're smiling weird," she said over breakfast, spoon hovering midair. "I am not," I replied too quickly. She narrowed her eyes in a way that reminded me painfully of myself. "You are." I changed the subject. At work, I was sharper than usual, efficient, controlled. But underneath it all, I kept thinking about the hallway, about how close we had been, about how I hadn't flinched. Rowan texted me at noon. "We okay?" Just that. 3 words. No pressure, no guilt, just clarity. I stared at the message for a full minute before answering. "We're okay." Another pause. "Dinner tonight?" she added. I swallowed. This wasn't accidental proximity anymore. This wasn't hallway conversation or shared childcare. This was intentional. "Yeah," I wrote back. That evening felt different from the start. Not tense, just aware. Rowan came over wearing dark jeans and a soft cream sweater that made her look warmer somehow, softer. She brought takeout, claiming she didn't trust my cooking after last night's pasta incident. Maya laughed like she'd been waiting for that joke. The 3 of us ate at the table, but something had shifted in the current between Rowan and me. Our knees brushed once under the table. Neither of us pulled away immediately. Maya eventually drifted into her room to finish homework. The apartment fell quiet. Rowan leaned back in her chair, studying me. "You're thinking too hard," she said. "I don't do anything halfway," I replied. "I know." That was the problem. Silence stretched between us again, but it wasn't awkward. It was anticipatory. "You don't regret it?" she asked softly. The question wasn't dramatic. It was vulnerable. I looked at her hands resting on the table, steady but tense. "No," I said honestly. "I don't." Her shoulders relaxed slightly. I stood first this time, stepping closer without hesitation. There was no hallway, no interruption, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the quiet breath of the apartment at night. When I reached her, I didn't test the distance. I closed it. My hand slid to her waist, more certain now. Her arms came around my shoulders naturally, instinctively. This kiss wasn't a question, it was an answer. Deeper, slower, intentional. She tilted her head slightly, fingers threading into the back of my hair. My pulse roared in my ears, but my movements were steady, controlled. Except for the way I pulled her closer, except for the way my hands pressed just a little firmer at her lower back. When we broke apart, neither of us stepped away. Her forehead rested lightly against mine. "We should talk about boundaries," she murmured. "Probably," I agreed again. But my hands didn't move. Her thumbs traced slow circles against my shoulders. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't reckless. It was grounding. For the first time in years, intimacy didn't feel like a vulnerability someone could weaponize. It felt like choice. Then my phone buzzed. The sound snapped the moment in half. I stepped back immediately, pulse spiking for a completely different reason. Unknown number. My stomach dropped. I answered. "Officer Hart." A familiar, measured voice came through the line. "This is Ms. Caldwell from Child Protective Services. We need to move forward with the home assessment tomorrow." My throat went dry. "Tomorrow?" I repeated. "Yes. We've received additional documentation." Additional documentation. My mind raced. Rowan watched my face change, her expression shifting from warm to alert instantly. "Is there a problem?" she asked when I hung up. "They're accelerating the review," I said quietly. "Someone submitted more information." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Lena," she began carefully. "I didn't." "I know," I interrupted. And this time, I meant it. She stepped closer again, not romantically now, steadily. "Then we'll handle it," she said. "We." The word settled into my chest differently than anything else that night. I had spent so long believing strength meant isolation, but standing there, with her hand sliding into mine without hesitation, I realized something uncomfortable and undeniable. Strength could also mean allowing someone to stand beside you, and for the first time since the report was filed, I didn't feel like I was bracing for collapse alone. But I also knew something darker was building. Because investigations don't accelerate without pressure, and pressure meant someone wanted me to fall. The email came at 6:12 a.m. I was halfway through pouring coffee when my phone vibrated against the counter. The subject line alone made my stomach drop. Temporary custody review scheduled. I opened it with hands that were steadier than I felt. A formal hearing date, 2 weeks out. My ex had filed for emergency review based on evidence of ongoing neglect. Ongoing. The word was surgical, precise, damaging. Maya walked into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes, unaware that our life had just tilted again. "You okay?" she asked, noticing my stillness. "Yeah," I lied automatically. "Just work stuff." I hated that I was already protecting her from something she didn't even know was coming. Rowan knocked 15 minutes later. She didn't usually knock anymore, she just texted, so the knock alone made me tense. When I opened the door, she studied my face for less than a second before saying, "What happened?" I stepped aside to let her in. "She filed," I said quietly. "Emergency review." Rowan inhaled sharply. "On what grounds?" "Neglect. Anonymous report. They're saying it wasn't an isolated concern." Her eyes darkened. "That's not just a random neighbor then," she said carefully. "No." Maya disappeared into her room to grab her backpack. Rowan and I stood in the kitchen, voices low. "She's building a case," Rowan continued. "You know that." I did. My ex had always been strategic. She didn't act unless she believed she could win. "Do you think she's behind the second report?" Rowan asked. I shook my head slowly. If she were, she wouldn't need anonymity. She'd use it openly. Rowan crossed her arms, thinking, "You're not losing her," she said firmly. I almost laughed. "That's not how the system works," I replied. "It's not about what's fair. It's about optics." "And what do the optics show?" she pressed. I looked at her. Single cop mother. Long shifts. Child occasionally alone. Her jaw tightened. "She's not alone," Rowan said. The conviction in her voice hit me like a hand at my back. Maya came out then, backpack on, blissfully unaware. "Bye, Rowan," she chirped, hugging her without hesitation. Rowan hugged her back just as easily, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't casual. This wasn't proximity. This was attachment. When Maya left for school, the apartment felt heavier. "I'll testify," Rowan said suddenly. I blinked. "You don't have to." "I want to." She cut in gently. "I've been here. I know the routine. I know she's safe." "Testify." The word made this feel real in a way paperwork hadn't. "You realize that means they'll question you too," I said, "about your involvement, about us." Her eyes held mine steadily. "Then we tell the truth." My pulse quickened for reasons that had nothing to do with courtrooms. "And what is the truth?" I asked quietly. She stepped closer. "That I care about her. That I care about you." The honesty in her voice stripped the air between us. I reached for her without thinking this time. Not desperate. Not frantic. Just needing contact. She wrapped her arms around me, pulling me fully against her chest. I hadn't let anyone hold me like that in years. Not since the divorce. Not since I decided vulnerability was a liability. But in Rowan's arms, it didn't feel like weakness. It felt like release. My forehead pressed against her shoulder. "I'm scared," I admitted into the fabric of her sweater. Her hand moved slowly up and down my back. "I know," she whispered. And she did. That night after Maya fell asleep, Rowan stayed, not out of convenience, not out of momentum, but because neither of us wanted distance. We sat on the couch, legs tangled loosely, talking about logistics, lawyers, documentation, school records, but the practical conversation was threaded with something softer. At one point, she reached up and brushed her thumb along my jaw. "You don't have to carry this alone," she murmured again. I kissed her before she could say anything else. This kiss was different from the others. Less tentative, more anchored. Her hand slid into my hair, and mine traced the curve of her waist slowly, deliberately. The world outside the apartment felt hostile and unpredictable, but here, in the dim light of my living room, with her body warm against mine, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself in years. Stability. When we finally pulled apart, breath mingling in the quiet room, she rested her forehead against mine. "We're going to fight this," she said softly. "We." I nodded. Because for the first time since the report had been filed, I wasn't preparing to stand in front of a judge alone. But somewhere beneath the relief, a darker thought crept in. If my ex was escalating this aggressively, She must believe she has something stronger than an anonymous tip. And I had no idea what that something was. The second knock didn't come from CPS. It came from internal affairs. I knew the cadence before I even opened the door. 3 firm, deliberate raps. Official, controlled. I glanced at Rowan, who was sitting at my kitchen table with a folder of school records spread out between us. Her expression shifted instantly from calm to alert. When I opened the door, 2 officers stood there in plain clothes. One of them held a manila envelope. "Officer Hart," the taller one said evenly. "We need a word." Maya was at school, thank God. Rowan stood up slowly behind me but didn't step forward. "What's this about?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Allegations of conduct unbecoming," the shorter one said. "Conflict of interest involving a civilian connected to an open CPS case." My stomach dropped. They stepped inside. Rowan's jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. The taller officer opened the envelope and slid a few printed screenshots onto my kitchen counter. Security footage. Time-stamped. Rowan entering my apartment after hours. Rowan staying overnight. Rowan and me in the hallway, too close to be misinterpreted. My chest went cold. "This was submitted anonymously to both CPS and the department," the officer said. "It suggests inappropriate involvement between a responding officer and a civilian connected to a custody investigation." My ex. It had to be her. She wasn't just building a case in family court. She was attacking my credibility. "If there's a romantic relationship," the officer continued, "it must be disclosed, especially given the open review." I felt Rowan step closer to my side. "This is harassment," she said quietly. The shorter officer glanced at her. "Ma'am, your relationship status with Officer Hart is part of the review." Relationship status. The words felt surreal. "Yes," I said firmly. "There is a relationship." Rowan's fingers brushed against mine. Brief, but steady. "And is this relationship impacting the child's care?" the taller officer asked. "No," I answered immediately. "If anything," Rowan said evenly, "it's strengthening it." The officers exchanged a look. "We'll need a formal statement," one of them said. "From both of you." When they left, the silence in the apartment was suffocating. Rowan exhaled slowly. "She's trying to make it look unethical," she said. "She is," I agreed. My ex wasn't attacking my parenting anymore. She was attacking my judgment, my professionalism, my morality. "She's going to argue that you can't be objective about a report if you're romantically involved with someone connected to it," Rowan said. "I wasn't responding to the report," I replied. "It wasn't even my precinct. That won't matter if she frames it right." Rowan stepped in front of me. "Look at me." I did. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said. The certainty in her voice was almost painful. But doubt had already crept in. Not about us, about optics. "She's going to say I exposed Maya to instability," I said quietly. "New partner. Ongoing investigation. Conflict." Rowan reached up and cupped my face gently. Her touch was grounding. "Lena," she whispered. "Loving someone is not instability." The words pierced through the fog in my head. My hands slid around her waist instinctively, pulling her closer. "I won't let her use us against you," she said. "Us." The word no longer startled me. It steadied me. I leaned down and kissed her. Not frantic, not desperate. Just solid. Present. Her fingers tightened in the fabric of my shirt. When we pulled apart, I rested my forehead against hers. "This might get ugly," I warned. She didn't flinch. "I don't scare easily," she replied softly. That night, I sat on the couch long after Rowan went back to her apartment. My ex wasn't just trying to win custody. She was trying to dismantle me, and she had chosen the one thing I never let myself have as the weapon. But here was the truth she didn't understand. I didn't feel weaker with Rowan. I felt clearer. The next morning, I received confirmation. The hearing would now include review of environmental stability and adult influences. We weren't just fighting anonymous accusations anymore. We were fighting narrative, and narrative is harder to prove wrong. I closed my phone slowly, then I walked across the hallway and knocked on Rowan's door. When she opened it, still half asleep, I didn't speak. I just stepped inside and wrapped my arms around her. She held me without asking why. "We're not hiding," I murmured into her hair. She pulled back slightly. "No," she agreed, and for the first time since this started, I realized something powerful. If my ex wanted to argue that loving someone made me unstable, she was about to learn exactly how wrong she was. The CPS home assessment happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Rowan didn't stay in her apartment. She didn't hover either. She sat at my kitchen table, paperwork neatly organized, her presence steady but not performative. No theatrics. No overcompensation. Just quiet certainty. Maya had been coached gently, not rehearsed. Just prepared. Answer honestly, I told her. Don't try to protect me. She rolled her eyes at that. I'm not 5, Mom. When Ms. Caldwell walked in, her gaze scanned everything with clinical precision. The couch, the fridge, the hallway, the bookshelves. Rowan. And you are? She asked. Rowan Blake. Rowan replied evenly. I live across the hall. And you've been involved in Maya's daily routine? Yes. There was no hesitation. Ms. Caldwell scribbled something in her notebook. And are you romantically involved with Officer Hart? The question hung heavy. I didn't look at Rowan. Yes, she answered. The air shifted. Ms. Caldwell didn't react visibly, but I could feel the weight of documentation stacking silently. Maya was called into the living room next. She sat straight-backed in her chair, legs barely touching the floor. Do you ever feel unsafe at home? Ms. Caldwell asked gently. No, Maya said immediately. Has anyone ever left you alone for long periods? Maya frowned. Sometimes Mom works late, she admitted. But Rowan makes sure I'm okay. Ms. Caldwell glanced at Rowan. And how does she do that? She asked. Maya shrugged. She texts Mom. She lets me sit at her table. She makes grilled cheese better than Mom. Rowan coughed lightly to hide a laugh. My chest tightened. And do you like Rowan? Ms. Caldwell asked. Maya looked confused. Of course, she said. She's nice. The interview lasted 45 minutes. It felt like hours. When Ms. Caldwell finally stood to leave, she paused at the doorway. Officer Hart, she said carefully. Your daughter appears stable, supported. Supported, not neglected. Supported. She left without offering reassurance, but she also didn't leave with concern etched into her voice. When the door closed, my legs felt weak. Rowan stepped closer slowly. You did good, she murmured. I didn't do anything, I replied. She tilted her head. You let someone see the truth. That was harder than it sounded. That night, after Maya went to bed, the adrenaline finally drained from my body. I found Rowan sitting on my couch, quiet, waiting. I almost ruined this, I said suddenly. She looked up. What? When I accused you, I clarified. When I thought you'd reported me. Rowan studied my face carefully. You were scared, she said. I was wrong. Yes, she agreed softly. The honesty should have stung. It didn't. It grounded me. I've spent so long assuming the worst, I continued. It's easier than being disappointed. Rowan stood and crossed the space between us. Her hand slid up my arm slowly, deliberately. Lena, she said, voice low. I'm not here to take anything from you. Her thumbs brushed gently along my collarbone. I'm here because I care about you. The simplicity of it disarmed me completely. I reached for her without hesitation this time. Not careful. Not testing. Certain. Our mouths met with a deeper hunger than before, less cautious, more sure. My hands traced down her back, pulling her fully against me. Her fingers slid into my hair, tightening slightly as she exhaled against my lips. This wasn't hallway tension anymore. This wasn't tentative. It was chosen. I walked her backward slowly until her legs hit the edge of the couch. She let herself fall onto it, pulling me down with her. My badge wasn't digging into my side. My shoulders weren't rigid. For once, I wasn't bracing for impact. Her hand slid beneath the hem of my shirt, fingers warm against my skin. I inhaled sharply. Tell me if this is too much, she murmured against my mouth. It's not, I answered honestly. Her lips moved from my mouth to my jaw, to the curve of my neck. The sensation unraveled something inside me that had been wound tight for years. I wasn't just afraid of losing my daughter. I'd been afraid of wanting anything for myself. Her hands weren't demanding. They were steady, present. Every touch felt like permission instead of pressure. When we finally paused, breathless, foreheads pressed together, I realized something undeniable. I hadn't felt this safe in someone's arms since before my marriage fell apart, and that terrified me almost as much as the court date. Rowan brushed her thumb along my cheek. You're not alone in this, she whispered. I believed her now, but I also knew something else was coming. Because my ex didn't escalate investigations without a final move, and I hadn't seen her last card yet. The courtroom smelled like polished wood and recycled air. I had testified before, criminal cases, traffic violations, domestic disputes. But sitting at that table felt different. There was no badge to hide behind today, no uniform. Just me, in a navy blouse and slacks, hands folded too tightly in front of me. Rowan sat behind me on the wooden bench, close enough that I could feel her presence like a steady pulse at my back. Maya was with my sister for the morning. I didn't want her anywhere near this. My ex stood across the aisle with her attorney, composed and sharp as ever. She didn't look angry. She looked strategic. That scared me more. The judge called the case. My ex's attorney spoke first. "Your Honor, we are not questioning Officer Hart's love for her daughter," he began smoothly. "We are questioning her judgment. Long hours. An open CPS report. A newly introduced romantic partner living across the hall. Instability. Instability." The word echoed inside my head. He presented the hallway footage. Still images of Rowan entering my apartment late at night. Screenshots printed like evidence of wrongdoing. "Would you say this relationship began before the CPS report?" he asked me when it was my turn on the stand. "Yes," I answered. "And did this neighbor regularly spend unsupervised time with your daughter?" "Yes." "And you see no issue with that?" I held his gaze. "No." He tried to paint recklessness. I gave him consistency. When Rowan was called to the stand, she walked forward without hesitation. Confident, steady. "Ms. Blake," the attorney began, "what exactly is your relationship to the child?" Rowan didn't flinch. "I care about her," she said simply. "And I care about her mother. And did you insert yourself into their routine?" "No," she replied. "I responded when an 8-year-old knocked on my door." A few quiet murmurs rippled through the room. The attorney pressed harder. "Did you ever report Officer Hart to CPS?" Rowan's jaw tightened slightly. "No." "Did you ever express concerns about her parenting to anyone?" "No." Her voice never wavered. Then came the moment I hadn't anticipated. My ex's attorney pulled out a second document. An email chain. Not from Rowan. From the downstairs neighbor. A series of complaints about a child left unattended. The timestamps matched the initial report. Not Rowan. Not even close. My chest tightened with something between relief and rage. The judge reviewed the documentation carefully. Then she looked at me. "Officer Hart, the court sees no evidence of neglect. The child appears supported and well-adjusted." Supported. The word again. "As for your relationship with Ms. Blake," the judge continued, "the court does not consider a stable, supportive adult presence a liability." Stable. I almost laughed. My ex's face didn't crack, but I saw it. The slight tightening at the edge of her jaw. She hadn't expected this to collapse. The judge finalized the decision. Temporary custody remains unchanged. Just like that. It was over. When we stepped outside into the courthouse hallway, the air felt lighter than it had in weeks. Rowan exhaled slowly. "You're still standing," she murmured. I turned to her. "So are you." My ex walked past us without stopping. No goodbye, no threat, just cold silence. But it didn't matter anymore. Rowan reached for my hand. This time I didn't hesitate. I laced my fingers through hers in full view of the public hallway. No hiding, no shielding. Just us. "I almost destroyed this," I said quietly as we walked toward the exit. "You didn't," Rowan replied. "I tried." She stopped walking, turned to face me fully. "You were scared?" she said gently. "That's not destruction. That's human." I searched her face. "You could have walked away." I didn't want to. The simplicity of it undid me more than the hearing had. Right there, under the high ceilings and fluorescent lights, I pulled her into a kiss. Not heated, not frantic, just full. Certain. A promise. Not a question. When we pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine. "You ready to go home?" she asked softly. Home. For the first time, the word didn't just mean my apartment, it meant her too. The night after the hearing, I stood in my kitchen barefoot, staring at nothing. The apartment felt the same. Same cabinets, same couch, same hallway light that flickered occasionally and annoyed me more than it should. But something inside me had shifted permanently. For years, I had built my life around endurance, survived the shift, survived the divorce, survived the paperwork, survived the loneliness. I thought strength meant absorbing impact without cracking. I was wrong. Strength was letting someone stand beside me when I could have chosen isolation. Maya ran into the living room and threw her backpack on the couch. "Did we win?" she asked bluntly. I crouched in front of her. "We did," I said. She grinned, relief flashing across her face, and immediately asked, "Can Rowan come over?" I laughed. A real laugh this time. "She probably will," I replied. Rowan knocked 5 minutes later like she always did when something mattered. I opened the door before she could knock again. She looked different tonight, not because of what she was wearing, just jeans and a soft green sweater, but because her shoulders weren't braced anymore. "You okay?" she asked. "I am," I answered honestly. Maya barreled into her, hugging her waist. Rowan wrapped her arms around her instinctively, resting her chin lightly on top of Maya's head. I watched them from a few feet away, not with suspicion, not with guarded caution, with something warmer. Later, after Maya went to bed, tired from the emotional weight she didn't fully understand, Rowan and I sat on the couch in the dim light of the living room. No court dates looming, no CPS visits scheduled. Just quiet. "You know," Rowan said softly, "I never thought I'd end up in a courtroom defending someone I cared about." I leaned back into the couch. "I never thought I'd let someone," I admitted. She turned her body slightly toward me. "You don't have to let me," she said gently. "I want to be here." I looked at her fully then, not as the neighbor I judged, not as the potential threat I imagined, not even as the woman who testified beside me. Just Rowan, the woman who sat on my living room floor teaching my daughter how to draw stars. The woman who held me when I finally admitted I was scared. The woman who stayed. I reached for her slowly, deliberately. She leaned into me without hesitation. Our kiss wasn't urgent tonight. It wasn't fueled by adrenaline or fear of loss. It was grounded, familiar. Her hand slid up my arm, fingertips tracing lightly along my shoulder. Mine rested at the small of her back, keeping her close without pulling. When we broke apart, she didn't move away. "Lena," she said softly, "I don't want to be across the hall forever." The words hung between us, not pressure, not expectation, just possibility. "You mean?" I asked. "I mean, I want this to be intentional," she clarified, "not just proximity." I studied her face. There was no manipulation there, no urgency, just steady truth. "You're not faking anything, are you?" I asked quietly. Her lips curved faintly. "No," she replied. "I'm terrible at pretending." I believed her, because I had seen her when she thought no one was watching. With Maya. With me. "I was wrong about you," I said. "I know," she answered gently, "and you still stayed." Yes. That single word carried more weight than any declaration of love could have. I pulled her closer, resting my forehead against hers. "I don't want to do this halfway," I admitted. "Then don't," she whispered. So I didn't. I kissed her again, deeper this time, not because I was trying to prove something, but because I wanted her to feel what I felt, not desperation, not fear. Choice. Her hand slid beneath my shirt slowly, warm against my skin, not rushing, not demanding. I let myself lean into it fully. Not as a cop, not as a defendant, not as a woman bracing for loss, just as Lena. When we finally pulled back, breath mingling in the quiet room, I realized something profound. I had spent so long protecting my daughter from the world. But what she had needed all along was to see me loved. Not perfect, not invincible, just loved. Rowan brushed a thumb along my cheek. "You're not alone anymore," she murmured. And this time, it didn't scare me. It steadied me. Because loving her hadn't weakened my foundation. It had strengthened it. I thought my neighbor was fake and heartless. I was wrong. She wasn't the threat. She was the reason I finally stopped pretending I didn't need anyone beside me. And that, more than any court ruling,